Frankly, it was really Deb. It was all her thing. I actually had been involved with land trusts a little bit before. I'd gone to a couple of the National Land Trust rallies. And so I was really excited about the concept of land trust, but it was, as far as I know, purely her initiative to say, hey, we should have a land trust here in Southeast Alaska.
Deborah Marshall came to me and said, hey, you want to get on this board? We're doing a land trust. And at the time, I thought it was a really neat idea to preserve land for a long period of time.
And then Deb Marshall approached me and came in. At that time, she was the treasurer on the board, and Deb said she was ready to go on to greener pastures, and would I be interested in being on the board? Well, that was not, I mean, I was a pretty busy boy at that time, and so anyway, I decided, yeah, okay, I'll give it a shot. So I went, and the next thing I know, I mean, at the first meeting, all of a sudden, she's gone, I'm the new treasurer, and things were off to the races at that time.
So I talked to a few people here in town about, hey, maybe we should start one here in Southeast. Deborah Marshall was all gung-ho, so bought her a ticket. She went up to Homer, attended the seminar, came back, and essentially that's SEALT Trust got formed shortly thereafter.
Judge Stewart's relationship with Carolyn Jensen was key in getting our first conservation easement at the Jensen-Olson Arboretum. I was really taken by his knowledge of who owned what throughout, at least northern Southeast. We would talk about a property, he would know the property, he would know the owner, he would know how to get a hold of them, and then he would spell their names. He would make sure we had the proper spelling of everybody's name we dealt with.
As well as being our parliamentarian.
That's right.
It was really cute. He kept reminding us that you didn't need a second on motions. Just make the motion. If there aren't any objections, we'll just go with it.
I'm a member of the organization called SEALT Trust, which is the organization that deals with property owners who wish to establish long-term protection of their private property from unwanted development. And we help them we guide them in establishing conservation easements on their property.
I would have had no history with Southeast Alaska Land Trust if Pat Harris didn't call me up one day and say, let's go for a walk. And then she proceeded to just tell me the whole story about how sea level rise and these meander-line boundaries of these private lands. So the refuge, I think of my walk with Pat and how kind of fortuitous that was.
Well, that's
for
probably
my
been
life.
my biggest accomplishment for SEALT Trust.
Pat Harris, and she was the head of the board at that time, and she was a go-getter. Man, she kept us going, put all kinds of time into it. But Pat really she really brought it all together and kept it going. She was amazing. I think she was on for many, many years after that too. She was kind of the heart and the soul and really took a lot of it.
He was a dedicated conservationist. He was very critical board member at the time, and a great guy.
He's just a very perceptive person, and he also cared so much about Juneau.
Jim King had the vision.
And very dedicated to what SEALT Trust is doing, and he was one of the first large donors of anything to SEALT Trust.
And it came out of Jim King's kind of thought about ecological systems, and that is he had a kind of a larger, broader view. And he was saying, you know what we should be doing, thinking about a legacy, is not just to have these postage stamps kind of properties, but let's think about corridors, because that's what wildlife like. They like corridors. How do they get to the water? And then he came up with this concept of green zone and brought it to the board. And I thought, what a wonderful thing, because now we're thinking really out of the box, but we're thinking about ecological systems in Southeast Alaska.
Really wanting to keep something not for himself, It was for the next generation and the next generation.
Ed Heiser, in the business of wildlife, he never left his basic view of the environment in any way he could support it, either, when he worked for Fish and Game or in retirement.
Diane not only got SEALT Trust a bunch of properties, kicked in the whole in lieu fee program and started that rolling, she just brought the land trust from a very shaky, small organization to now a very reliable, accredited organization that landowners can turn to.
As a federal employee building partnerships for conservation, he was amazing. And he found conservation partners throughout Southeast, and he would do annual grants to keep their work afloat. And where he saw an opportunity, he would do everything he could. Neil, Steve Brockman was there, John Hudson. That team of guys did a lot, and that was crucial.
The city and borough has been a wonderful partner in this exercise, not just in the wetlands, but in partnering with SEALT Trust on a lot of different properties.
In 2008, one of the things I remember was the interagency group that we worked with and the federal partners there. We were able to put it together, and it worked.
So just the fact that we're talking years, it's plural, gives some idea of the magnitude of the criteria that you had to meet. And having someone like Gretchen, Gretchen and Lisa are the two best writers I've known in my entire career, so here we are sitting with both of them. But having Gretchen there at the helm writing this, and then, like Pat says, making the argument in Alaska, it's like everything is threatened, so let's use those fees to preserve valuable things, which is much less costly than try to recreate. FAA is used to big numbers for mitigation. And then, as Gretchen said, having, between us the confidence of the interagency and the support of the interagency team as they're trying to assess what is the mitigation for the Juneau Airport. That was significant to really put SEALT Trust in a position that when there was something to preserve of value, and like spending it around the refuge, the ability just to have these conversations with these landowners and have some way to back it. And I'll also just jump over to Sitka real quick, because the Sitka airport was redone. The outcome for Sitka, thanks to fees in lieu, and the sweet spot that we were in, thanks to Gretchen's brilliant application, we were able to, take that position and acquire that property, and then Sitka now has a seawalk through that upland, and the intertidal of Crescent Bay is...
And an airport extension that probably had to happen.
Just watching Diane work this crowd. It was the National Park Service, it was the city and the Assembly of Sitka, and Sheldon Jackson, and all these different players.
And the title companies and the appraisers.
And it was masterful.
John Houghton,
Oh, that's right.
He was great, and he was like, this is a good mitigation project. It's fun. When they work, it's fun. Just to even get in queue in the nation to get your accreditation was, took a little bit of juggling, and then you get there, and then you have your time frames, and then to meet the standards. We can meet the highest professional standards. That's why we do what we do, and so anyway, so to get into the queue to get it, but then to meet all the standards that they set up as they're creating this accreditation program was amazing. And and Gretchen and I were both working, but we had Bethany Wiley, who was just another brilliant young woman, just and clear thinker, very clear writer. We hired this woman to read Bethany's work before we submitted it, and I think she had like maybe 10 or 20 edits in the entire application. She said she had never from any land trust gotten anything as clean as she got from Southeast Alaska Land Trust, but I think she's charged us the same, but she was really... So then I thought, oh my God, how's Allison doing? And I've been impressed with her ability to carry on the work we've done and the professionalism and the creativity, but to see her re-up that accreditation, I think is fabulous.
She and I went to Carolyn's property when this whole thing was first starting. And of course, now Judy's a landscaper now, but she was very, excited. And here's all this garden. And we drive up and no sign of Carolyn. But as we're getting out of the car, this white head pops up. And there she is. The Arboretum is such a going concern now.
It first came to our attention from Jim.
Yeah,
right.
Was pursuing quiet title and on his accreted property, and wanted us to look into a conservation easement, putting a conservation easement on it, which was the first time I'd heard about accretion or anything, or anybody else on the board, I guess. Mm-hmm. We started investigating and actually talking to Roman about isostatic rebound, and realizing that there probably were a lot of properties around the refuge that were accreting and that were potential conservation properties that we'd like to conserve to eventually get back in the refuge or somehow conserve them. We got some money from
Coastal Impact Assistance Program, CIAP.
And with that, we commissioned Discovery Southeast to do a kind of a bio survey of it and talk about important areas of the wetlands where we wanted to establish priorities for conservation. So Richard Carsonson and crew did that for us, and that took about a year for him to do that.
Right.
Most of my focus when I was on the board was on the refuge. Not all of it, but those were the years in which we were most active in acquiring property around the wetlands, Mendenhall wetlands.
But they knew of my work, it would rebound, and it was the time that the airport was going to do an expansion. And in order to do the expansion, they were going to cover up wetlands. So they had to provide mitigation funds. And the SEALT Trust got that. And at the time, and I think still now even yet, the thought was to use as much of that in order to protect the Mendenhall Wildlife Refuge. So some of my early time with the SEALT Trust was to work with them, explaining to people, to the upland owners, what's going on, because some of them just maybe didn't understand and what their rights were. And but also just basically I love being involved with SEALT Trust. They're doing some really other neat work too.
And the view shed, to me, that was always from the long-term community standpoint, the most important part of that entire parcel. Because you come down the highway and you get past the trees and that whole vista opens up over those wetlands, and you can see all the way down the channel, the bridge.
Over to the mainland.
But to me, when you look at the values, that view shed, not only the refuge values, immediately on site, but given that we are so pinned in with the beauty of these mountains, that you have that vista. And to me, again, not only the refuge values, which are just phenomenal themselves, the wetland values, but I'm thrilled that SEALT Trust was able to close the deal on that.
So buying those Hunsinger Pond properties was really a great thing.
Juneau long-term development plan, the backside of Douglas Island is going to be commercial, residential, nodes all the way along, and Hilda Creek and the mouth of Hilda Creek is designated as a recreation area. And a lot of it will be the land SEALT Trust bought and gave to the city with an easement, is going to be that core open space, recreation area around that future development. It might not happen for 100 years, 80 years, a long time, but there it is.
I first became aware of SEALT Trust when my family was journeying out to one of the iconic hikes of Juneau at Boy Scout Camp Beach. And as we drove to the trailhead, we found a steel gate blocking our access. Unbeknownst to us and many others in Juneau, we had actually been transiting across a piece of private property that had been long-time access to the trailhead and had been sold. And the new owner claimed that easement was only granted to the Boy Scout camp and the public was excluded. SEALT Trust actually became very involved in this issue, which, as you might imagine, caused some consternation in the community, and managed to broker a deal between the landowner and using federal funds in order to purchase the land, which we now know as the Herbert River Wetlands, and to put a conservation easement on it so that the public has access in perpetuity.
One of my most favorite properties that we protected while I've been here has been the Lobaugh Conservation Easement on Admiralty Island. Getting to work with Sharon Lobaugh and really talk to her and listen to her about her family's history there, her husband Cliff Lobaugh and his goals and wishes for that property. That is a really special property and just a really meaningful experience to help Sharon and her family achieve that conservation goal for that land.
I think that's always been SEALT Trust's emphasis. They have never just gone out and gone after the new shiny object that shows up, the acre and a half in the middle of nowhere. They've always had a sort of a big plan in mind, and the two areas that I think of besides the refuge, one is Montana Creek, where there's a variety of agreements with the city and other landowners and acquisitions out there have done a marvelous job of creating a viable, recreational entity out there in Montana Creek.
One of the things that he pushed hard on and participated in was creating the paper called the Juneau Green Zone. And that looked at all of the lands out the road, both public and private, that were being used by the public, and really how that land out there was Juneau's playground.
And now we have properties in Haines, we have properties in Sitka, we have properties in Cake, we have properties
Farragut Bay
near Petersburg. So we need to have connections with these communities in order to be sort of sustainable. And I think in the long term, that's kind of what the organization needs to figure out, a better way to be region-wide, to live up to our name of Southeast Alaska Land Trust. Many of our properties are important for salmon in particular, other fish as well, but also salmon habitat for juveniles, which most people kind of ignore. They want to catch the salmon in the ocean and forget that they have to come from somewhere. And our protection of that habitat is, I think, really important. If the climate change issue doesn't get solved, those lands may be more important because they will still be protected and in some form, and maybe in a different form, but they will still be critical for helping people adapt to a changed environment.
But this idea of wetlands and cultural values and ecological values being retained for years, I think is really important.
The emphasis on wetlands, a lot of it is driven by the in lieu fee program where mitigation was required by the Corps of Engineers. Another challenge going forward is that agency policies can change and the amount of mitigation being required is probably pretty minimal these days and not at all consistent with our concept of no net loss. Nevertheless, these wetland acquisitions are very important, not only in terms of viewscape and community use, but in terms of ecological function.
But you have to have landowners who actually cherish what they have, and they too see themselves as sort of the temporary steward. I mean, the title will move, somebody will buy it, progress happens, and they know what they have. But all the preparatory work to get that grant, you need membership, you need members, and members of this organization are key to keep it afloat.
And I do think there is still a very relevant need for land trusts. Not all land is wilderness. Land near communities are especially valuable for green space or recreational space. And the land trust model provides an opportunity for private-public partnership that you wouldn't get otherwise. And I think also it's really important that land trust law is adapting and changing, and the beauty of a land trust is it can adapt with those laws as well. So as our need for open space or space near our towns isn't developed or is developed wisely, the land trust is a critical piece of that overall protection and for future generations.
But really, for our children and us, it's close in proximity to natural areas that was really important. And that's what SEALT Trust does. And so, I sort of soon learned that that's why SEALT Trust is important.
Wow, what they're doing, it's just amazing. And, getting the in lieu fees and then, translating that into easements. I mean, when you think about, Deb Marshall's dream from way back and how it grew, and because of people like all of you and the commitment to keeping it going, it is really just been a phenomenal thing to watch grow and see what has happened. So it's really exciting that we're at this point with an anniversary.